The Barrett .50 caliber should have broken her shoulder. Staff Sergeant Lucia Torres looked like any other Marine at Fort Bragg, until she put 18 rounds through the same hole at 900 meters without flinching. Master Chief Morales had seen thousands of shooters, but when he investigated her background, one question haunted him. If her official record showed basic training scores, who was the sniper called Phantom that had been eliminating high-value targets across 4 countries with 3,500-meter confirmed kills? The morning sun cast long shadows across the shooting range at Fort Bragg as Master Chief Diego Morales watched the new arrivals line up for weapons qualification. 25 years in the Navy SEALs had taught him to spot potential from a mile away, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to witness. Among the Marines stood a woman who couldn't have been more than 27. Hair pulled back in regulation style. Blue eyes focused with an intensity that caught his attention immediately. Staff Sergeant Lucia Torres moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent countless hours perfecting her craft. But there was something else, a stillness about her that reminded Diego of the best snipers he had known. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle lay before her like a sleeping giant. Most shooters approached the weapon with visible respect, bordering on fear. The Barrett was no ordinary rifle. It was an anti-material weapon capable of stopping vehicles and penetrating concrete walls from distances that seemed impossible. The recoil alone had been known to bruise shoulders and rattle teeth of unprepared shooters. Before we continue, please comment below where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe to the She Force Tales channel. Lucia approached the weapon differently. She moved around it slowly, examining every component with the methodical attention of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. Her hands traced the barrel, checked the scope mounts, and tested the bipod legs with gentle pressure. When she finally settled behind the rifle, it was as if the two had become one entity. Diego had seen hundreds of Marines attempt their first shot with the Barrett. Most flinched, some missed the target entirely. A few required medical attention after the massive rifle delivered its punishing recoil. But as Lucia positioned herself, Diego noticed something remarkable. She seemed completely relaxed, her breathing steady and controlled. The target sat 900 meters downrange, a standard distance for qualification, but challenging enough to separate the skilled from the merely adequate. Lucia adjusted the scope with minute precision, her movements economical and purposeful. She chambered a round with the smooth action of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times before. The first shot cracked across the range like thunder. Through his binoculars, Diego watched the target paper flutter as the massive bullet punched through at dead center. Impressive, but not unprecedented. It was her reaction that caught his attention. No celebration, no visible satisfaction, just the mechanical process of chambering the next round. The second shot followed within 30 seconds. Another perfect center hit, then a third. By the fourth shot, other instructors had stopped their own activities to watch. By the seventh shot, a small crowd had gathered behind Lucia, all staring in amazement at the increasingly shredded center of the distant target. Lucia fired 18 rounds in total, 18 shots that could have been fired by a machine for their consistency and precision. When she finally set the rifle down and stood, there was polite applause from the gathered Marines and instructors, but Lucia barely acknowledged it. She simply nodded to the range master and began cleaning the weapon with the same methodical precision she had shown in firing it. Diego approached her as she worked. Up close, he could see the calluses on her trigger finger, the slight squint lines around her eyes that came from years of peering through scopes, and something else, a distant look that he recognized in veteran snipers who had seen action. "Outstanding shooting, Staff Sergeant," Diego said, extending his hand. "Master Chief Morales, Naval Special Warfare Development Group." Lucia looked up from the rifle she was cleaning, her blue eyes meeting his with a directness that was both respectful and confident. "Thank you, Master Chief. Just doing what I was trained to do." Her voice carried a slight accent that Diego couldn't quite place, but there was something in her tone that suggested depths of experience beyond her apparent age. He had expected the usual response from a Marine showing off, pride, excitement, maybe some boasting about natural talent. Instead, Lucia's reaction was almost matter-of-fact, as if exceptional marksmanship was simply expected rather than extraordinary. "Mind if I ask where you learned to shoot like that?" Diego asked, genuinely curious. That kind of precision doesn't come from basic training. Lucia continued cleaning the Barrett's bolt, her movements precise and efficient. My uncle taught me to shoot when I was 9, she said without looking up. Started with a .22, worked my way up. He always said that shooting was 85% mental, 15% technique. Your uncle sounds like he knew his business, Diego replied. Military. For the first time, Lucia paused in her cleaning. A shadow crossed her face so briefly that Diego almost missed it. Something like that, she said quietly, then resumed her work. Diego had interrogated enough people in his career to recognize when someone was being deliberately vague. There was clearly more to Lucia's story than she was willing to share with a stranger, even one with his credentials. But he had also learned that the best operators often carried secrets, and pushing too hard too fast was rarely productive. Well, if you're ever interested in expanding your skill set, DevGru is always looking for shooters with your talent, Diego said, handing her his card. We run some specialized programs that might interest you. Lucia took the card and glanced at it briefly before tucking it into her breast pocket. I appreciate that, Master Chief, but I'm happy where I am. As Diego walked away, he found himself puzzled by the encounter. He had met thousands of shooters in his career, from fresh recruits to seasoned snipers with confirmed kills in multiple theaters. But something about Lucia Torres didn't fit the typical mold. Her shooting was too perfect, too controlled, too professional for someone who should have been learning rather than demonstrating mastery. That evening, Diego found himself in his office, staring at Lucia's personnel file on his computer screen. What he found there was frustratingly routine: an exemplary Marine with excellent fitness reports, a clean disciplinary record, and shooting scores that were good, but not exceptional. Nothing in her official record suggested the level of skill he had witnessed that morning. But Diego had learned to read between the lines of military records. The gaps in Lucia's training history, the vague references to special assignments, and the fact that someone with her obvious talents hadn't been selected for sniper school all pointed to a story that wasn't being told through official channels. He closed the file and leaned back in his chair, troubled by questions he couldn't answer. In his experience, shooters like Lucia didn't just appear fully formed. That level of skill required years of practice, professional instruction, and most importantly, real-world application under pressure. The question that would haunt him for days was simple. Where had Staff Sergeant Lucia Torres really learned to shoot? And what wasn't she telling him about her past? For days after the shooting demonstration, Diego found himself unable to shake his curiosity about Lucia Torres. He had run background checks on promising candidates before, but something about her performance nagged at him in a way that felt different from simple professional interest. During his lunch break, he decided to do some unofficial investigating. The Marine Corps personnel database contained the standard information: birth date, enlistment details, training records, and duty assignments. Lucia had enlisted 5 years ago at age 22, completed basic training at Paris Island with honors, and had been assigned to various infantry units before her current posting. Her marksmanship scores during training were good, but not exceptional. Certainly nothing that would predict the performance Diego had witnessed. What caught his attention were the gaps. Lucia had taken 4 extended leaves during her service, each lasting several weeks and marked simply as personal emergency with no additional details. For a young Marine without family complications listed in her file, multiple extended absences seemed unusual. Diego picked up his phone and dialed an old friend at Marine Corps Intelligence. Gunnery Sergeant Alex Rivera had been running background investigations for 16 years and owed Diego several favors from their joint operations in Iraq. Rivera here, came the familiar gravelly voice. Alex, it's Diego Morales. I need a favor. Seal boy, what trouble are you stirring up now? Diego explained his interest in Lucia Torres, being careful to frame it as routine vetting for potential special operations recruitment. Rivera promised to make some quiet inquiries and get back to him within a few days. Meanwhile, Lucia continued her regular duties, seemingly unaware of the attention her shooting had generated. Diego made it a point to observe her during unit physical training and noticed the same controlled precision in her movements. She ran with the mechanical efficiency of someone accustomed to long distances, her breathing steady even during the most challenging exercises. During combat training scenarios, she displayed tactical awareness that seemed advanced for her official experience level. But it was during a routine training exercise that Diego witnessed something that deepened his suspicions. The Marines were running close-quarters combat drills when one of the instructors decided to add complexity by introducing a hostage scenario. A volunteer played the role of a captive held by an armed instructor, with the challenge being to neutralize the threat without harming the innocent. What's in Puerto Penasco? Mostly fishing and tourism. Population maybe 60,000. But here's what's interesting. It's also home to one of the most elite private military training facilities in North America. A place called Desert Tactical Solutions. Diego had heard whispers about Desert Tactical Solutions during his years in special operations. It was supposedly where wealthy individuals, private military contractors, and certain government agencies sent people for training that was too sensitive or too specialized for official military programs. The kind of place that didn't advertise and didn't keep public records. You think she was training there? I think she was doing something there, Rivera replied. But here's where it gets really interesting. I reached out to a buddy who works security contracting in the Middle East. He says there's been talk on the circuit about a sniper working the Afghanistan-Pakistan border region. Female, extremely skilled, taking contracts that the regular military won't touch. Goes by the call sign Phantom. Diego felt a chill run down his spine. You think it's her? I think your Marine Staff Sergeant has been leading a double life. The timing of her leaves corresponds exactly with some major operations that this Phantom character was supposedly involved in. Operations that require the kind of shooting skills you witnessed. After hanging up, Diego sat in his office, staring at Lucia's official photograph. The young woman in the picture looked like any other Marine. Professional, competent, but unremarkable. But Diego now suspected he was looking at someone who had been living two lives, maintaining the facade of a regular service member while secretly operating as one of the world's most skilled snipers. The ethical implications troubled him. If Lucia was indeed working as a private military contractor during her leaves, she was potentially violating military regulations and possibly federal law. Diego decided he needed to confront her directly, but carefully. If Lucia was indeed the sniper known as Phantom, she would be extremely dangerous if she felt threatened or exposed. He would need to approach her in a way that demonstrated he could be trusted with her secret, while making it clear that he knew more than she might be comfortable with. That afternoon, Diego found Lucia in the armory, meticulously cleaning weapons after the day's training. The methodical way she disassembled and cleaned each component spoke to someone who understood that weapon maintenance was literally a matter of life and death. Staff Sergeant Torres, Diego said quietly, ensuring they were alone. I'd like to speak with you privately. Lucia looked up from the rifle she was cleaning, and Diego saw a flash of wariness in her blue eyes before her expression became neutral. Of course, Master Chief. How can I help you? I've been doing some research since our conversation the other day, Diego began carefully. Your shooting skills are exceptional, the kind that usually comes from specialized training and real-world application. Lucia continued cleaning the weapon, but Diego noticed her movements had become more deliberate, more controlled. I told you, Master Chief. My uncle taught me well. I'm sure he did, but I'm curious about your travels to Mexico, specifically to Sonora. Lucia's hands stopped moving entirely. For several seconds, the armory was completely silent except for the distant sound of Marines training outside. When Lucia finally looked up, her eyes held a hardness that hadn't been there before. I think we need to have a longer conversation, Master Chief, she said quietly. But not here. That evening, Diego and Lucia met at a quiet bar 30 miles from base. Lucia took a sip of her beer, organizing her thoughts. One of the instructors at a competition noticed my skills and approached me. He said there were opportunities for someone with my talents, but they required specialized training that wasn't available through normal channels. The pay would be excellent, and I could help serve causes that regular military service couldn't address. So you started training there while you were still in high school. Summers and weekends. Advanced marksmanship, surveillance, infiltration techniques, languages. The instructors were former military from a dozen different countries: SEALs, SAS, Spetsnaz, Mossad. I learned things that most special forces operators never see. Diego was beginning to understand the scope of Lucia's deception. And when you enlisted in the Marines, it was part of the plan. Desert Tactical needed operators with legitimate military credentials who could take extended leaves without raising suspicions. The Marine Corps was perfect cover. I could maintain my official military career while taking contracts on the side. The contracts in Afghanistan, Diego pressed gently. Lucia's expression darkened, and she stared into her beer for several moments before continuing. High-value targets that regular military couldn't touch due to political considerations. War criminals hiding in neutral territories. Terrorist leaders operating from locations where official military action would create diplomatic incidents. The 3,500-meter shot, Diego said quietly. That wasn't just a rumor, was it? Lucia looked up sharply, surprise replacing the weariness in her eyes. How could you possibly know about that? That operation was completely black. Word travels in the special operations community, even when it's not supposed to. A shot like that becomes legend. Lucia was quiet for so long that Diego began to wonder if she would continue. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that spoke of memories she wished she could forget. I spent 8 days moving into position. The shot had to be taken from a ridge across a valley to avoid civilian casualties and provide a clear escape route. The distance was extreme, over 3.5 kilometers, and the environmental conditions were challenging. High altitude, variable winds, temperature changes throughout the day. 500 meters, Diego said. That's over 2 miles. That's why you want to stay in the regular Marines, Diego said, understanding. You're tired of the black operations. I'm tired of being a phantom, Lucia replied, using her call sign for the first time in their conversation. I want to serve my country in the light, not the shadows. I want to train other Marines, pass on my skills in an official capacity. I want my service to mean something that I can talk about when I'm old. The question now, Diego said carefully, is what happens next. You've told me things that could end your military career if they became official knowledge. As the conversation concluded and they prepared to return to their separate lives, Diego found himself thinking about the possibilities that Lucia's unique situation presented. Her skills, combined with official military oversight and support, could serve American interests in ways that neither her previous contract work nor regular Marine service could achieve. The challenge would be finding a way to utilize her exceptional abilities while respecting her desire to serve openly and honorably. Diego suspected that the answer lay somewhere between the shadows where Lucia had operated as Phantom and the conventional military service she now sought as Staff Sergeant Torres.